In the vastness of space, where even the most advanced civilizations tremble before nature's cruelty, there exists a truth that separates humanity from every other species in the galaxy. When death comes calling in the frozen void, when hope dies and survival becomes impossible, humans don't just endure. They reach out to strangers and pull them back from the edge of eternity. What you're about to witness isn't just a rescue story. It's the moment an entire galaxy learned why humans are the only species crazy enough to risk everything for someone they've never met, don't understand, and may never see again. This is the story of how a single act of human warmth in the coldest corner of space rewrote the rules of galactic civilization forever. Some say humans are reckless. Others call them soft-hearted fools. But when you're dying alone in the darkness, there's only one species in the universe you want to find you. And once they do, they'll move heaven, earth, and every star between to make sure you live to see another day. The emergency beacon cut through space like a dying scream, its signal barely stronger than cosmic background radiation. Most ships would have missed it entirely, written it off as stellar interference or the death rattle of some ancient probe. But the cargo hauler's steadfast heart wasn't most ships, and Captain Marcus Chen wasn't most captains. There, Chen said, pointing at the faint blip on his scanner. Emergency beacon, bearing 27 Mark 6. His first officer, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, squinted at the display. The signal was so weak it looked like a glitch. Captain, that's way off our shipping route. We're already behind schedule for the Kepler station delivery. Chen studied the readout, his weathered face creased with concern. In his 23 years hauling cargo across human space, he'd answered distress calls that turned out to be pirates, false alarms, and worse. But he'd also saved lives that would have been lost if he'd chosen profit over people. The math was simple in his mind. Schedules could be adjusted, but death was permanent. How far off course, he asked. 18 hours, minimum. Maybe 22 if we have to perform a rescue operation. Martinez pulled up the navigation charts. And, Captain, look at this trajectory. That signal's coming from the Zereth expanse. The bridge fell silent. Everyone in human space knew about the Zereth expanse, a region of space where gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and unstable stellar phenomena made navigation a nightmare. It was technically neutral territory, but most species avoided it entirely. The risk wasn't worth whatever might be hiding in those twisted sectors of space. Any identification on the beacon? Chen asked. Martinez worked the communications panel, filtering through static and interference. Negative on ship identification, but I'm picking up what looks like a Zelfrin frequency signature. Captain, if that's right, then we're looking at a species that's not supposed to be in this sector. Chen rubbed his chin. The Zelfrins were a peaceful trading race, known for their artistic culture and advanced biotechnology. They were also notoriously careful pilots who never ventured far from established shipping lanes. If a Zelfrin ship was sending distress signals from the expanse, something had gone seriously wrong. Sir, came a voice from behind them. Ensign Rodriguez, barely 6 months out of the academy, looked up from his station. I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference from that direction. Looks like the remnants of a solar storm, maybe 3 days old. Chen nodded grimly. Solar storms in the expanse weren't like the manageable flares near Earth or the colonies. They were violent, unpredictable events that could fry ship systems, disrupt navigation, and leave vessels dead in space. If a Zelfrin trader had been caught in one of those storms. Options, people, Chen said. We could report the beacon to the nearest patrol ship, Martinez suggested. Let someone with proper rescue equipment handle it. Nearest patrol is the Valkyrie, Rodriguez said after checking the fleet positions. They're 47 hours away, minimum. Chen did the math in his head. A ship caught in a solar storm would be running on backup power, if any power at all. Life support systems would be failing. Food and water reserves would be dwindling. 47 hours might as well be forever for anyone trapped out there. Prep the ship for course change, Chen ordered. We're going after them. Captain, Martinez said carefully, the company's going to have our heads if we miss the Kepler station delivery. That's medical supplies for the outer colonies. And I'll take full responsibility for that decision, Chen replied. But I'm not leaving someone to die in the expanse because we were worried about paperwork. The steadfast heart changed course with the subtle vibration that always accompanied a major navigation shift. Chen felt it in his bones, the moment when a routine cargo run became something else entirely. He'd made this choice before, and he'd probably make it again. It was just who humans were. 18 hours later, they reached the edge of the signal's origin point. What they found made the entire crew stop and stare. The Zelfrin ship was barely recognizable as a vessel. The dancing star, according to the faint hull markings still visible, had been torn apart by the solar storm's electromagnetic pulse. Its sleek organic curves, typical of Zelfrin biotechnology, were now twisted metal and shattered biocomposites. The ship hung motionless in space, dark except for a few flickering emergency lights. Life signs? Chen asked. Rodriguez worked frantically at his sensors. I'm reading 2 faint signatures, Captain. Very faint. They're in what looks like an emergency shelter in the ship's core. Can we dock? Negative, Martinez reported. Docking collar's been sheared off. We'll have to EVA over. Chen was already moving toward the equipment lockers. Rodriguez, you're with me. Martinez, keep us positioned and monitor for any changes in the Expanse's conditions. Sir, shouldn't I be the one? Martinez started. You're the better pilot, Chen said, pulling on his EVA suit. If something goes wrong over there, I need you here to get us home. The journey between ships felt like crossing an ocean in a rowboat. Space around the Expanse shimmered with residual energy from the solar storm, creating an eerie aurora effect that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Chen and Rodriguez moved carefully, using magnetic grapples to pull themselves along the damaged hull of the dancing star. Finding an intact airlock took precious minutes. When they finally got inside, Chen immediately understood why the life signs were so faint. The ship's atmosphere was barely breathable, and the temperature was just above freezing. Emergency lighting cast everything in a hellish red glow. This way, Rodriguez said, consulting his scanner. The signals are coming from the core section. They made their way through corridors that looked more like the inside of a living creature than a starship. Zelfrin biotechnology had always seemed alien to human engineers, but now, damaged and dying, it looked almost organic in its decay. Walls that should have pulsed with life were still and cold. The emergency shelter was a small chamber near the ship's center, protected by multiple layers of bioarmor that had somehow survived the electromagnetic assault. Chen activated his suit's external speakers as they approached the sealed door. Hello, he called. This is Captain Chen of the human vessel Steadfast Heart. Can anyone hear me? Silence. Then, so faint he almost missed it, a sound that made Chen's blood run cold. It was a voice, speaking in the musical tones of the Zelfrin language, but weak and desperate. And underneath it, something else, a sound that was universal across all species. A child was crying. Rodriguez was already working on the door's biomechanical lock. Captain, I think I can get this open, but it's going to take time. The biocircuits are mostly dead. How long? Maybe 10 minutes? Chun pressed his helmet against the door, trying to make contact with whoever was inside. We're here to help, he said, not knowing if they could understand English. We're getting you out. The voice on the other side grew a little stronger, though Chen couldn't understand the words. But he could hear the relief, the desperate hope of someone who had given up on rescue and, suddenly, found it at their door. While Rodriguez worked on the lock, Chen activated his suit's translation protocols. The Steadfast Heart had a basic Zelfrin language package, enough for trade negotiations, but hopefully sufficient for this situation. My name is Marcus Chun, he said slowly, hoping the translation software was working. We are humans. We heard your distress signal. The voice on the other side paused, then responded in halting, accented English. Humans? You came for us? Yes, Chen said. How many are you? What's your status? 2, came the reply. I am Lyralii of the traitor clan Moon Whisper. My daughter is dying. Our life support failed 2 days ago. I have been keeping her warm with my own body heat. But the voice broke off, and Chun heard that universal sound again. A parent's despair when their child is beyond their power to save. We're going to get you out, Chen said firmly. Both of you. Do you understand? We're not leaving without you. You do not understand. Lyralii's voice was barely a whisper. We are Zelfrin. Our body temperature is much lower than yours. In this cold, my daughter's metabolism has slowed. If it stops entirely. Chen looked at Rodriguez, who was making progress with the door. Zilfran physiology was different from human. He knew that much. They were adapted for the cooler environments of their homeworld, with metabolisms that could slow dramatically in extreme conditions. It was a survival trait, but it had limits. How long do we have? Chen asked. Minutes, Lyralii replied. Maybe less. She has not moved in hours. The lock finally gave way with a soft biomechanical sigh. Chen pushed through the opening and immediately understood the desperate nature of the situation. The emergency shelter was tiny, barely large enough for 2 people. A Zilfran female sat curled against the far wall, her iridescent blue skin now pale and gray. In her arms, she clutched a child who couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old by human standards. The child was completely still, her small form wrapped in what looked like every piece of cloth and emergency material available. The translation was right, Chen murmured to Rodriguez. She's been keeping the kid warm with her own body heat. But now both of them were dying. Chen could see it in the way Lyralii moved, slow, sluggish motions of someone whose metabolism was shutting down. Her daughter wasn't moving at all. Captain, Rodriguez said quietly, our EVA suits aren't designed for passenger rescue. We can't transport them in this condition. Chen was already thinking, his mind racing through options. The trip back to the Steadfast Heart would take at least 20 minutes, maybe longer if they had to move carefully. In their current condition, neither the mother nor child would survive that journey in the cold vacuum of space. But there was another option. A dangerous one. Chen began unsealing his EVA suit. Captain, what are you doing? Rodriguez grabbed his arm. They need heat, Chen said simply. More heat than our suit heaters can provide. He looked at Lyralii, who was watching with confused, desperate eyes. The human body runs hot compared to most species. If I can get skin-to-skin contact with the child. Sir, you'll die of exposure before we get back to the ship. Maybe, Chen acknowledged. But they'll definitely die if we don't try. He was already pulling off his outer suit layers. My core temperature is 98.6 Fahrenheit. That's like a furnace compared to their normal body heat. Rodriguez stared at him for a moment, then began stripping off his own suit. Then we both do it. You take the kid, I'll help the mother. We can share heat between all 4 of us. Chen had never been prouder of his crew. You sure about this, Ensign? Human beings don't leave people to die in the cold, sir. Not if there's something we can do about it. What followed was the most carefully coordinated rescue operation of Chen's career, performed in a freezing emergency shelter while wearing minimal protective gear. Chen gathered the Zilfran child against his chest, sharing his body heat directly through skin contact, while Rodriguez did the same with Lyralii. The effect was almost immediate. Human body heat, so much higher than the Zilfran baseline, began warming the child's sluggish metabolism. Chen could feel her heart beating against his chest, slow but steady, growing stronger as his warmth spread through her small form. She's responding, he told Lyralii, who was also beginning to show signs of recovery as Rodriguez shared his heat with her. You are burning, Lyralii whispered in wonder, feeling the warmth radiating from the human bodies. Your skin is like fire. Just our normal temperature, Chen replied through chattering teeth. The shelter was still freezing, and giving up that much body heat was taking its toll on both humans. But we need to get moving. We can't maintain this for long. The journey back to the Steadfast Heart became a carefully choreographed dance of survival. Chen and Rodriguez took turns carrying the Zilfrans, sharing warmth, and pulling themselves along the magnetic guidelines they'd established. Their modified EVA suits provided minimal protection, but it was enough to keep them alive during the crossing. Martinez had prepared the ship's medical bay, turning up the heat and preparing warm blankets. When they finally made it aboard, all 4 of them were hypothermic to some degree, but alive. As Chun watched Lyralii hold her daughter, now conscious and responsive thanks to the shared human body heat, he felt that familiar satisfaction that came with doing the right thing. It wasn't about being a hero. It wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about the simple principle that when someone needed help, you helped them. Captain, Lyralii said as the medical bay's warmth gradually the news traveled faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks that spanned the galaxy. Within 72 hours of the steadfast heart's arrival at Kepler Station, every major species in the Galactic Trade Confederation knew about the human rescue in the Zereth expanse. But it wasn't just the rescue that caught everyone's attention, it was the video. Lyralii had used her personal recording device to document what she thought might be her final hours with her daughter. She'd wanted to leave something for her clan, some record of their last moments together. Instead, she'd captured something that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The footage showed two humans stripping off their protective suits in the freezing emergency shelter, literally sharing their body heat with dying strangers. It showed Captain Chun holding a Zelfrin child against his bare chest while his own lips turned blue from cold. It showed Ensign Rodriguez wrapping his arms around Lyralii, sharing warmth that meant the difference between life and death. Most importantly, it showed their faces. Not the grim determination of soldiers following orders, but the simple, natural expressions of people doing what they thought was right. There was no hesitation, no debate about cost-benefit analysis or species politics. Just immediate action to save lives. The video went viral across every species network simultaneously. On the Thurian homeworld, Ambassador Krek Thor watched the footage for the 7th time, his massive form hunched over a display screen in his private quarters. The Thurians were a warrior race, proud of their military traditions and physical prowess. They respected strength, courage in battle, and honor in combat. But this was something different. This was strength of a kind Krek Thor had never encountered before. They made themselves vulnerable, he rumbled to his aide, a younger Thurian named Gexmore. They removed their protection to warm strangers. In my culture, we would call this madness. Gexmore studied the display, watching Chin's shivering form wrap around the Zelfrin child. But it worked, Ambassador. The children survived. Yes, Krek Thor said thoughtfully. It worked. He paused the video at the moment when the Zelfrin child first opened her eyes, looking up at Chin's face with wonder and recognition. Tell me, young Gexmore, how many Thurian warriors would risk death to save an alien child? Gexmore considered this carefully. Few, Ambassador. Perhaps none. And yet these humans did it without question. The captain, yes, but also the young one. A junior crew member who could have stayed safely on their ship. Krek Thor leaned back in his chair, a piece of furniture that groaned under his weight. What kind of species breeds such uniform compassion? The question was being asked across the galaxy. On the crystal spires of the Zerani homeworld, First Speaker Velthara convened an emergency session of the Cultural Analysis Council. The Zerani were philosophers and scientists, a species that prided itself on logical thinking and rational decision-making. They had built their civilization on careful analysis, measured responses, and calculated outcomes. The human rescue video broke every model they had for intelligent behavior. By all rational measures, announced Chief Analyst Morkila, the human actions were illogical. They risked their cargo delivery deadline, potentially costing their employers significant profits. They exposed themselves to unknown dangers in the Zereth expanse. Most critically, they reduced their own survival chances by sharing body heat with aliens whose metabolic requirements they could not fully understand. And yet, First Speaker Velthara observed, they succeeded. The Zelfrins survived, the humans survived, and they completed their cargo delivery only 18 hours behind schedule. The success rate is irrelevant to the logical analysis, Morkila insisted. They could not have known the outcome when they made their decision. From a rational standpoint, their behavior was aberrant. Velthara manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on Chen's face during the critical moments. Look at his expression, Morkila. Does this appear to be aberrant behavior to you? Or does it appear to be completely natural for this individual? The analyst studied the image for long moments. Chen's face showed strain from the cold, determination, and careful focus as he monitored the Zelfrin child's condition. But there was something else there too, a kind of peaceful certainty, as if he were exactly where he belonged. It appears natural, Morkila admitted reluctantly, which suggests that for humans, this type of self-sacrifice for strangers is not aberrant behavior at all. It may be baseline normal. Veltharad dismissed the display and turned to face the council. We need to completely revise our assessments of human psychology. Similar conversations were happening across dozens of worlds. But nowhere was the impact more profound than in the Imperial Palace on the draconian homeworld of Flame's Edge. Emperor Zek the Prime had built his empire on the principle that power meant the right to ignore the suffering of others. The Draconians were apex predators, evolved from creatures that ruled their world through individual strength and cunning. Their society reflected those origins, hierarchical, competitive, and focused on personal advancement above all else. The Human Rescue video challenged everything Zek the Prime believed about the nature of intelligent life. Explain this to me, the Emperor demanded, his scaled form coiled on the throne that had been carved from a single massive crystal. Why would predators deliberately weaken themselves to strengthen prey? His chief advisor, General Morthek, had been dreading this conversation. My Emperor, the humans may not view other species as prey. Their actions suggest a different social structure entirely. All intelligent life is predator or prey, Zek the Prime hissed. It is the fundamental law of existence. The strong consume the weak, or the weak drag down the strong. There is no third option. Perhaps, General Morthek said carefully, the humans have found a third option. The Emperor's eyes blazed with anger. Impossible. They are clearly predators. Their military capabilities prove that. Their ships, their weapons, their expansion across space. All predator behavior. But then, they do this. He gestured at the display showing Chun holding the Zelfrin child. Predators do not nurture other species young. No, my Emperor. They do not. Zek the Prime was silent for long minutes, studying the frozen image. Bring me everything we have on human military doctrine. I want to understand how a species that produces warriors also produces whatever this is. The answer to that question was being discussed in emergency sessions of the Galactic Trade Confederation Council on the neutral station of Harmony Point. Representatives from 17 different species had gathered to address what was being called the human question, specifically, what to do about a species that seemed to operate outside all known models of interspecies behavior. They're dangerous, insisted Ambassador Queckvel of the Scorpion Federation. Any species that disregards self-interest so completely cannot be trusted to make rational decisions in crisis situations. They saved lives, countered Ambassador Earthnala of the Altarian Republic. 2 lives that would have been lost if they had made rational decisions. Exactly my point, Queckvel replied. Rational beings can be predicted. These humans act on emotion and impulse. Today they save lives. Tomorrow they might decide our trade agreements threaten some other species and tear up decades of negotiation. Ambassador Hyrek Prime of the Centauran Union studied the data pad in front of him. Actually, the evidence suggests human behavior is quite predictable, just not in the ways we expected. Analysis of their actions over the past 50 years shows consistent patterns of intervention on behalf of weaker parties, protection of civilian populations during conflicts, and resource sharing during natural disasters. Regardless of cost to themselves, added Ambassador Earthnala. They evacuated 14,000 Quran refugees during the solar storm crisis on New Koror, using their own ships and supplies. They provided medical aid to the Thylian plague victims even though their species was immune and had no strategic interest in the outcome. The pattern is clear. Queckvel's insectoid features showed agitation. The pattern is chaos. How do you negotiate with a species that might suddenly decide to help your enemies simply because they need help? Perhaps, said a new voice, the question is not how to negotiate with them, but how to become worthy of their help. Every head turned toward the speaker. Ambassador Lyralii of the Zelfrin trading clans, making her first public appearance since the rescue. She had requested special permission to address the council, and no one had expected her first words to be quite so pointed. With respect, Ambassador Lyralii, Queckvel said carefully, you may be too emotionally invested in this situation to provide objective analysis. Lyralii's response was calm, but firm. I am the only being in this chamber who has experienced human rescue protocols firsthand. I watched Captain Chun risk his life for my daughter without knowing our names, our clan affiliations, or our trade value. He asked for nothing in return. When I offered payment, he refused it. She activated a holographic display showing the medical records from her daughter's treatment aboard the Steadfast Heart. My daughter's core temperature had dropped to levels that would normally result in permanent neurological damage. The human body heat that Captain Chen shared with her quite literally saved her brain function. Ensign Rodriguez did the same for me. We understand the humans acted with compassion, Ambassador Hyrek Prime said diplomatically. The question is whether this compassion makes them reliable partners in galactic affairs. I think, Lyralii replied. You are asking the wrong question entirely. She manipulated the display, showing the moment when Chen first held her daughter. Look at his face. This is not a political calculation or a strategic decision. This is simply what humans do when they encounter suffering they can alleviate. The chamber fell silent as the representatives studied the image. What I experienced was not just rescue, Lyralii continued. It was acceptance. Captain Chen did not see an alien child. He saw a child in need. The fact that she was different from him was completely irrelevant to his response. Ambassador Queckvel shifted uncomfortably. You're suggesting that humans view all intelligent species as equals? I'm suggesting that humans view all intelligent species as people, Lyralii corrected. The distinction matters. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber. Most galactic civilizations operated on hierarchical models, species alliances based on mutual benefit, trade partnerships calculated for advantage, military treaties designed to enhance security. The idea of treating all species as fundamentally equal was so foreign that many representatives struggled to process it. If that's true, Ambassador Earth Nala said slowly, then humans don't see themselves as superior to other species, despite their obvious military and technological advantages. Nor do they see themselves as inferior, added Ambassador Hyrek Prime. They simply see themselves as part of the same community as the rest of us. Lyralii nodded. When my daughter was dying, Captain Chen did not calculate the political benefits of saving a Zelfran child. He did not weigh the costs of intervention against the strategic value of our species' gratitude. He saw a parent losing a child, and he acted to prevent that loss. But such behavior is unsustainable, protested Queckvel. Resources are limited. A species cannot help everyone. Can they not? Lyralii asked. How many resources did Captain Chen's rescue actually consume? Some fuel, some time, some risk to 2 crew members. In exchange, my clan and the entire Zelfran species now view humans as the most trustworthy partners in the galaxy. From a purely economic standpoint, it was an excellent investment. Ambassador Hyrek Prime leaned forward. You're suggesting that human compassion is actually a sophisticated form of soft diplomacy? No, Lyralii said firmly. I'm suggesting that human compassion 6 months after the Zereth Expanse rescue. The galaxy learned what happened when you tried to test human resolve. The testing came from an unexpected source. The Vorthak supremacy, a militaristic empire that had spent the last 3 centuries conquering weaker species and enslaving their populations. The Vorthak operated on a simple principle. Power was the only currency that mattered in the universe, and those who couldn't defend themselves deserved whatever fate the strong imposed upon them. They had been watching the human response to the Zelfran rescue with growing disgust. These humans are weak, declared Supreme Commander Thrakvash from his command throne aboard the dreadnought Iron Dominion. They risk their lives for inferior species out of some misguided emotional dysfunction. Such weakness invites exploitation. His intelligence chief, Colonel Vector, had been studying human behavioral patterns for months. Supreme Commander, the humans possess significant military capabilities. Their technology is advanced, their fleets are well-armed, and their tactical doctrine is irrelevant, Thrakvash interrupted with a dismissive gesture of his clawed hand. Military capability means nothing without the will to use it ruthlessly. These humans have demonstrated that they value alien lives more than strategic advantage. That makes them predictable. Vector consulted his datapad. What are your orders, Supreme Commander? We will conduct a practical test, Thrakvash announced. Select a minor species under human protection. Threaten them with obliteration. The humans will either abandon them, proving their weakness is merely propaganda, or they will attempt rescue operations that will allow us to destroy their forces piecemeal. The target they selected was the research station Nova Bright, orbiting a gas giant in the Kepler system. The station housed 300 Altarian scientists conducting atmospheric studies that had potential applications for terraforming technology. More importantly, it was protected by a single human patrol vessel, the destroyer Defiant, under command of Captain Elena Vasquez. The Vorthack plan was elegant in its simplicity. A battle group of 6 heavy cruisers would surround the research station and demand the immediate surrender of all Altarian personnel for processing as slave laborers. The humans would have 3 choices: abandon the station to save their own ship, attempt a hopeless rescue that would result in their destruction, or call for reinforcements that would arrive too late to prevent a massacre. Any choice the humans made would prove Vorthack's superiority. Either they were cowards who abandoned allies, fools who threw away military assets, or weaklings who couldn't protect those under their care. Commander Thrakvash never considered a fourth possibility. Captain Vasquez received the Vorthack ultimatum while conducting routine patrol checks near Nova Bright. The message was transmitted on all frequencies, ensuring that every being in the system could hear it clearly. Human vessel Defiant. The transmission began in heavily accented Standard Galactic. You are ordered to withdraw immediately from this system. The research station and all Altarian personnel are now property of the Vorthack supremacy. Any attempt to interfere will result in your destruction. Vasquez looked at her tactical display, counting 6 Vorthack heavy cruisers arranged in a perfect attack formation around the research station. Each of those ships outgunned her destroyer by a factor of 3. Their combined firepower could reduce Nova Bright to debris in minutes. Captain, her tactical officer Lieutenant Commander Jackson reported, I'm reading full weapons lock from all 6 vessels. They're not bluffing about being ready to fire. Have they targeted us specifically? Vasquez asked. Negative. Their weapons are aimed at the research station. They're using the Altarians as shields. Vasquez studied the situation for exactly 10 seconds. Then, she opened communications on the same frequency the Vorthack had used for their ultimatum. Vorthack vessels, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Navy destroyer Defiant. I acknowledge receipt of your ultimatum. She paused, making sure her next words would be crystal clear. My response is, go to hell. On the bridge of the Iron Dominion, Commander Thrakvash stared at his communications console in disbelief. Did she just? She rejected the ultimatum, Supreme Commander, Colonel Vector confirmed. She's moving to intercept. 1 destroyer against 6 heavy cruisers? Thrakvash began laughing, a sound like grinding metal. The humans are even more foolish than I imagined. Destroy her ship immediately. But Captain Vasquez wasn't done talking. Nova Bright Research Station, this is Defiant. We're moving to your defense. Please implement emergency protocols and prepare for possible evacuation. Her voice carried across all frequencies, calm and professional. To the Vorthack commander, you want those scientists, you'll have to go through us first. What happened next became legendary throughout human space and beyond. The Defiant didn't charge recklessly at the Vorthack formation. Instead, Captain Vasquez maneuvered her ship between the research station and the nearest heavy cruiser, using her vessel's smaller size and superior maneuverability to make targeting difficult. But, more importantly, she began transmitting on every emergency channel in human space. This is Captain Vasquez aboard the destroyer Defiant in the Kepler system. We are engaged with 6 Vorthack heavy cruisers threatening the Nova Bright Research Station. 300 Altarian civilians are in immediate danger. Request immediate support from any human vessels in range. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Defiant asterisk. This is Captain Morrison aboard the cargo hauler Iron Horse. We're 18 hours out and coming hard. Defiant asterisk. Freighter Captain Sarah Chun on the steady hand. 22 hours to your position. We're armed with mining charges if that helps. Captain Vasquez, this is Admiral Richards aboard the battle cruiser Sword of Earth. 36 hours to intercept. Hold position at all costs. But the message that made Commander Thrakvash's blood run cold came from an unexpected source. Defiant asterisk. This is Captain Marcus Chun aboard the Steadfast Heart. We're 12 hours out with a full cargo of medical supplies and emergency rations. If you can keep those bastards busy, We'll make sure everyone gets home alive. It was the same Marcus Chun who had rescued the Zelfrin mother and daughter 6 months earlier. His reputation had spread throughout human space, and his presence in the battle carried symbolic weight far beyond his cargo hauler's limited combat capabilities. More messages followed. Within 2 hours, 17 different human vessels had reported course changes toward the Kepler system. They ranged from military patrol ships to commercial freighters, from scientific survey vessels to private yachts. None of them were ordered to respond. None of them had any official obligation to risk their lives for Altarian scientists they had never met. They came anyway. Commander Thrakvash watched his perfect tactical scenario crumble as dozens of human ships converged on his position. "This is impossible," he snarled. "No species commits its entire fleet to protect aliens." Supreme Commander, Colonel Vector reported nervously. "Long-range sensors are detecting additional vessels. The humans appear to be mobilizing everything in this sector." "How many ships?" 43, and counting, sir." Thrakvash stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "For 300 Altarian researchers?" But the humans weren't finished surprising him. While the Vordhack commander tried to process the unprecedented response, Captain Vasquez maneuvered the Defiant into an even more aggressive position. She wasn't just shielding the research station. She was actively challenging the Vordhack ships to a fight. "Vordhack commander," she transmitted. "You wanted to test human resolve? Let's see how your ships perform against someone who can shoot back." The Defiant opened fire on the nearest heavy cruiser, her plasma cannons striking the larger ship's shields with pinpoint accuracy. The attack did minimal damage. Her weapons were simply too small to threaten a heavy cruiser significantly. But the psychological impact was enormous. A single human destroyer was attacking 6 ships that collectively outgunned her by a factor of 18. "Return fire," Commander Thrakvash ordered. "Destroy that ship immediately." But Captain Vasquez had positioned her destroyer perfectly. The Vordhack ships couldn't fire on the Defiant without risk of hitting Nova Bright Station, and they couldn't move to better firing positions without exposing themselves to the growing human fleet converging on the system. For 3 hours, the Defiant danced between the Vordhack ships like a terrier harassing wolves. Captain Vasquez used every trick in the book: emergency maneuvers, debris fields, even the gas giant's gravity well, to keep her ship alive and the research station protected. When the first human reinforcements arrived, they didn't come alone. Captain Morrison's cargo hauler Iron Horse dropped out of hyperspace accompanied by 2 Thurian battle cruisers and a Zerani science vessel that had been retrofitted with defensive weapons. The alien ships had volunteered to assist after learning about the human response to the crisis. Defiant this is Captain Morrison. We brought some friends. Hope you don't mind the company. More ships continued to arrive, human vessels accompanied by allies from a dozen different species. The Zelfrin trading clans sent 3 of their fastest ships. The Altarian Republic deployed their home fleet despite the fact that Nova Bright was technically outside their territory. Even the usually neutral Centauran Union contributed a squadron of heavy fighters. By the time Admiral Richards arrived with the battle cruiser Sword of Earth, Commander Thrakvash found himself facing not 6 human ships, but 47 vessels from 9 different species, all committed to protecting a single research station. "This is impossible," he repeated, though with less conviction than before. Colonel Vector studied the tactical display with growing horror. "Supreme Commander, we're outnumbered 8 to 1. Recommend immediate withdrawal." "We cannot withdraw," Thrakvash snarled. "The supremacy does not retreat from inferior species." "Sir, these are no longer inferior species. The humans have united nearly half the galaxy against us." Admiral Richards settled the debate by opening communications directly with the Vordhack commander. "Commander Thrakvash, this is Admiral Richards of the United Earth Navy. You have threatened civilians under our protection. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system, or we will open fire with everything we have." Thrakvash looked at his tactical display one more time. 47 ships against his 6. Weapons locks from multiple species he had never even considered militarily relevant. And, at the center of it all, the tiny human destroyer that had started this entire confrontation, still positioned defiantly between his fleet and the research station. "Supreme Commander?" Colonel Vector prompted. Thrak made the only rational choice available. Signal the fleet. Full retreat. As the Vorthack ships jumped to hyperspace, Captain Vasquez finally allowed herself to relax in her command chair. The Defiant had sustained minor damage, and her crew was exhausted, but they had held the line long enough for the cavalry to arrive. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a message from Nova Bright Station. The Altarian research director wants to express their gratitude." "Tell them we were just doing our job," Vasquez replied. Any human ship would have done the same. But as she looked at the tactical display showing 47 ships from 9 different species, all gathered to protect 300 alien scientists, she realized that wasn't quite accurate anymore. The unexpected consequence of humanity's growing reputation came 18 months later, during what historians would remember as the Great Convergence Crisis. It started with a simple astronomical phenomenon: 2 massive stellar objects on a collision course in the Antares system. The neutron star and white dwarf had been spiraling toward each other for millennia, but their final approach would trigger an event that threatened to sterilize 14 inhabited worlds across 3 star systems. The gravitational waves alone would disrupt hyperspace travel for months. The radiation burst would kill any unprotected life within 20 light-years. Most critically, the collision would occur in exactly 73 days, giving the galaxy very little time to evacuate nearly 4 billion sentient beings. Under normal circumstances, such a crisis would have resulted in chaos. Different species would have prioritized their own people, leading to conflicts over evacuation resources, territorial disputes over refugee placement, and bitter arguments about who deserved rescue priority. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted only 4 hours before reaching unanimous consensus. Humanity would coordinate the evacuation efforts for all 14 worlds. "This is absurd," protested Ambassador Queckvel of the Scorpion Federation, though his objections sounded half-hearted even to himself. "Why should one species bear responsibility for the entire crisis?" Ambassador Lyralii of the Zelfrin trading clans had become the unofficial spokesperson for the pro-human coalition that now dominated galactic politics. "Because," she said simply, "they're the only species we all trust to save everyone." That trust had been earned through hundreds of smaller incidents since the Zelfrin rescue and the Kepler system confrontation. Human ships had become the galaxy's unofficial emergency response network, appearing whenever disasters struck, regardless of which species was affected or what strategic benefits might be gained. When a plague devastated the Koran homeworld, human medical teams worked around the clock to develop treatments, sharing their findings freely with anyone who needed them. When solar flares destroyed the orbital habitats of the Epsilon Centauri colonies, human cargo ships delivered emergency supplies before the government relief efforts even launched. Most importantly, humans never asked for anything in return. They didn't demand territorial concessions, trade advantages, or political favors. They helped because help was needed, and they left once the crisis was resolved. The result was a galaxy that had learned to look to humanity not for conquest or competition, but for hope. Admiral Sarah Chun, promoted from cargo captain after her efforts during the Kepler crisis, found herself appointed as Supreme Evacuation Coordinator for the Antares emergency. The irony wasn't lost on her that she now commanded resources from 17 different species, all placed under human authority by unanimous consent of their governments. 73 days to move 4 billion people, she said to her assembled staff in the hastily established command center on Luna Station. "Anyone want to tell me how we're going to make this work?" The staff represented the best minds from across human space: logistics experts, engineers, military strategists, and diplomatic liaison officers. They had been planning for 3 days straight, and their preliminary numbers were sobering. "We have transport capacity for approximately 2.8 billion individuals if we utilize every available ship from every species," reported Commander Rodriguez, now serving as Chin's chief logistics coordinator. "That leaves us 1.2 billion people short of full evacuation. Can we build additional transport capacity in 70 days? Chin asked. "Negative," replied Chief Engineer Martinez. "Even with round-the-clock construction and unlimited resources, We could maybe add capacity for another 100 million people. Chen studied the holographic display showing all 14 threatened worlds. Each point of light represented millions of lives. Thurian warriors, Zerani philosophers, Altarian researchers, Centauran traders, and dozens of other species. People who had never met each other, who might have nothing in common except the shared misfortune of living too close to a stellar collision. What about rotating evacuations? Suggested Lieutenant Patel from the Diplomatic Corps. Evacuate the closest worlds first, then use those same ships to evacuate the more distant worlds? Rodriguez shook his head. The gravitational effects will disrupt hyperspace travel in the affected systems 48 hours before the collision. We have to get everyone out in the first 25 days, or they're trapped. Chen felt the weight of 4 billion lives settling on her shoulders. In 71 days, every person they couldn't evacuate would die. Not from war, not from disease, not from any evil action, but simply from the universe's indifferent physics. There has to be something we're missing, she said quietly. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the former destroyer captain who had transitioned to astrophysics after the Kepler incident, burst into the command center with data files clutched in her hands. Sarah, we've been approaching this all wrong, she announced without preamble. We're not trying to evacuate 4 billion people. We're trying to save 4 billion people. Chen looked up from the tactical displays. What's the difference? Vasquez activated the main hologram, showing the detailed structure of the Andari system. Look at the asteroid fields, the gas giant moons, the orbital habitats. We don't have to move everyone to established worlds. We just have to move them away from the immediate radiation zone. The asteroid fields don't have life support, Rodriguez pointed out. But they could, Vasquez replied. Remember the Vortex siege ships we captured last year? They're designed as long-term habitat vessels. We could retrofit them as temporary colonies. Chen studied the proposal. How temporary? 6 months, maybe 8. Long enough for the radiation levels to drop and hyperspace travel to resume. Then, we can distribute people to permanent homes. It was audacious, risky, and completely insane. It was also perfectly human. Within 12 hours, the evacuation plan had been completely redesigned. Instead of trying to transport everyone to distant worlds, they would create temporary habitats in space. Asteroid bases, converted ships, orbital platforms, even hollowed-out moons. Each installation would house anywhere from 10,000 to 5 million refugees, creating a scattered network of survival nodes throughout the region. The engineering challenges were staggering. Life support systems had to be installed in environments never designed for habitation. Food production facilities had to be established in zero gravity. Medical centers had to be equipped for every known species' physiological needs. Most importantly, it all had to be done in 71 days. The galaxy's response was immediate and overwhelming. The Thurian Empire contributed their expertise in void construction, having built more asteroid habitats than any other species. The Zerani provided advanced life support technology and environmental controls. The Altarians designed hydroponic systems capable of feeding millions. Even former enemies like the Vortex Supremacy, now led by a reformed government, offered their converted siege ships as evacuation platforms. But it was the smaller contributions that showed how completely humanity had changed the galaxy's character. A Centauran trade family donated their entire fleet of cargo ships, accepting financial ruin rather than profit from the crisis. Zelthran artisan clans worked around the clock to produce comfort items, toys for children, musical instruments for adults, decorative panels to make sterile emergency shelters feel more like homes. Individual citizens from dozens of worlds volunteered for dangerous construction work, accepting the risk of injury or death to help save strangers. Admiral Chun watched the coordination efforts from the Luna Station Command Center, amazed by what she was witnessing. Representatives from 17 species worked side by side, sharing resources and expertise without concern for traditional boundaries or rivalries. Thurian warriors took orders from Zerani scientists. Altarian diplomats coordinated with Vortex engineers. Former enemies collaborated as if they had been allies for centuries. How did this happen? Asked Ambassador Hyrek Prime of the Centauran Union during one of the daily coordination meetings. 6 years ago, Half these species wouldn't communicate with each other except through intermediaries. Admiral Chun considered the question while watching a holographic display showing construction progress on Habitat Station 47, where Thurian workers and human engineers were installing life support systems designed by Zerani scientists for an expected population that would include refugees from 6 different worlds. "I think," she said finally, "it's because everyone realized we're all in the same boat." Meaning, the universe doesn't care what species you are when a neutron star is about to fry your homeworld. Stellar collision don't discriminate between Thurian warriors and Zerani philosophers. When you're facing something that treats everyone equally, you start to realize that maybe you should too. Ambassador Hyrek Prime nodded thoughtfully. And the humans taught us that it's possible to actually help each other instead of just competing for survival. The evacuation began 37 days before the collision. The first ships lifted off from the Thurian industrial world of Krek Prime, carrying 2.3 million workers and their families to a converted asteroid habitat in the Epsilon Centauri system. They were followed by transports from the Zerani research colonies, the Altarian farming worlds, and dozens of smaller settlements. What should have been chaos was instead the most precisely coordinated operation in galactic history. Human logistics coordinators managed traffic flow between star systems. Alien engineers solved technical problems in real time. Medical teams from multiple species worked together to handle the inevitable injuries and illnesses that accompanied such a massive displacement of population. Most remarkably, there was virtually no conflict between refugee groups. Thurian families shared cramped quarters with Zerani researchers. Altarian children played with Centauran youngsters in temporary recreation areas. Species that had been trading partners for centuries discovered they could also be friends. The final evacuation ship departed the Andari's system 11 hours before the stellar collision. Admiral Chun watched from the command center as the last transport cleared the radiation zone, carrying 47,000 refugees from a mining colony that had almost been overlooked in the initial surveys. Final count, reported Commander Rodriguez. 4,037,612 individuals successfully evacuated. Chun stared at the numbers. They had actually done it. Every person in the threatened zone had been saved, housed in temporary habitats that would keep them alive until permanent resettlement could be arranged. But the real victory wasn't in the numbers. It was in what the galaxy had become during those 73 days. 5 years after the Andari's crisis, the galaxy faced its greatest test yet, not from stellar collisions or hostile empires, but from the question of what to do when the rescuers themselves needed rescuing. The crisis began with a simple communication blackout from the Sol system. For 3 days, no messages came from Earth, Luna, Mars, or any of the dozen orbital installations that served as the hub of human civilization. Routine cargo ships found themselves unable to establish contact with traffic control. Diplomatic couriers received no acknowledgement of their transmissions. At first, the galaxy assumed it was a technical malfunction. Human technology was advanced, but all technology occasionally failed. Repair crews would fix whatever had broken, and normal communications would resume. But when a Zerani science vessel reached the edge of the Sol system and found it surrounded by an impenetrable energy barrier of unknown origin, technical malfunction became the least of everyone's concerns. The barrier was unlike anything in recorded galactic science. It completely blocked all electromagnetic radiation, communications, sensors, even visible light. From the outside, the Sol system appeared as a perfect sphere of absolute blackness, as if someone had cut a hole in space itself. "How is this possible?" demanded Emperor Zek the Prime during an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The Draconian ruler had become one of humanity's strongest supporters after witnessing their coordination efforts during the Andari's evacuation, but his warrior instincts still triggered when facing unknown threats. "Unknown," admitted Dr. Velthara of the Zerani Science Directorate. "Our best theoretical models suggest this barrier requires energy levels equivalent to the total output of a Type 3 civilization. No known species possesses such capabilities." Ambassador Lyralii studied the holographic display showing the blackened Sol system. "What about the humans inside? Are they alive?" "Impossible to determine," Dr. Velthera replied. The barrier blocks all sensors. We cannot detect ships, planets, or any form of activity within the affected area. The implications were staggering. Humanity's entire homeworld system was cut off from the galaxy, trapped inside a barrier that might be killing them or might be protecting them. No one knew which, and no one knew how to find out. We need to break through, declared General Morthek of the reformed Vorthak Republic. Assemble every ship, every weapon. Concentrate our firepower on a single point of the barrier. With what result? Asked Ambassador Hyrek Prime. If the humans created this barrier as a defense mechanism, attacking it might trigger a response that destroys them. If someone else created it as a weapon, attacking it might complete whatever process was intended. The debate continued for hours, with representatives from 43 species arguing about response strategies. Some wanted immediate military action. Others preferred cautious scientific investigation. A few suggested that perhaps the barrier would dissolve on its own if they simply waited. It was Ambassador Lyralii who finally voiced what everyone was thinking but afraid to say. We're arguing about how to save the people who taught us how to save each other, she said quietly. What does that say about what we've learned? The chamber fell silent. For the past 5 years, whenever anyone in the galaxy faced a crisis, the first question was always, are there humans available to help? We trusted them to coordinate our evacuations, mediate our conflicts, and sacrifice their resources for our survival. Now they need help, and we're debating whether helping them is worth the risk. Ambassador Quekvel, who had opposed human involvement in galactic affairs from the beginning, looked uncomfortable. The situation is different, Ambassador Lyralii. We don't understand the nature of the threat. Rushing to assist could make the situation worse. Or, Lyralii replied, it could be exactly what the humans would do if our positions were reversed. The question that followed was simple but profound. What would Captain Marcus Chen do? The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Chun himself appeared in the council chamber, not physically, but through a holographic message that had been transmitted to Zelfrin space months earlier and only recently decoded. If you're viewing this message, Chin's image said, then something has happened to Earth that prevents normal communications. I want everyone to know that regardless of what that something is, the principles we've tried to live by haven't changed. The hologram flickered as Chin's recorded image continued. Humans help people not because it's safe, or profitable, or strategically advantageous. We help because it's right. If we're gone, I hope the galaxy will remember that lesson. And if we're just trapped somewhere, I hope the galaxy will remember that the best way to honor what we've tried to teach is to help each other the same way we tried to help all of you. The message had been sent as part of a cultural exchange program, never intended as a final statement. But its timing felt almost prophetic. Emperor Zek the Prime was the first to respond. Assemble the fleets, he ordered his aide. Every ship the Draconian Empire can spare. Sir? The aide asked, confused by the sudden decision. We're going to rescue the rescuers, Zek the Prime explained. And we're going to do it the human way, together, without counting the cost, because it's the right thing to do. The mobilization that followed dwarfed even the Andari's evacuation effort. 43 species contributed ships, scientists, engineers, and resources to what became known as the Soul Liberation Project. The fleet that assembled at the barrier's edge included over 3,000 vessels, from massive Thurian battleships to tiny Centauran scout craft. But it wasn't the military power that made the effort remarkable, it was the cooperation. Zerani scientists worked with Vorthak engineers to develop barrier penetration technology. Thurian warriors took orders from Altarian strategists. Zelfrin traders coordinated supply lines with Scorpion logistics experts. Every species contributed their unique capabilities without concern for territory, profit, or political advantage. They were thinking like humans. The breakthrough came from Dr. Kolovex, a young Zerani physicist who had spent years studying human rescue techniques. While her colleagues focused on brute force approaches to breaking the barrier, she asked a different question. What if the barrier wasn't meant to keep people out, but to keep something in? Look at the energy patterns, she explained to the assembled science team. This isn't a defensive screen. It's a containment field. Something inside the soul system is being prevented from escaping. The implications sent chills through everyone listening. If something inside the Sol system was dangerous enough to require a barrier of this magnitude, then breaking through might unleash it on the entire galaxy. But it was Admiral Sarah Chun, Marcus's daughter, now commanding the human refugees aboard the evacuation habitat New Harmony, who provided the crucial insight. Dad always said the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't our weapons or our technology, she transmitted from her position near the barrier. It was our refusal to give up on people who needed help. If something's keeping us contained in there, it's because it doesn't understand that humans will always find a way to help each other. Her words sparked a new approach. Instead of trying to break the barrier, the Liberation Fleet began looking for ways to communicate through it. If humans were trapped inside, they would be working on their own escape. The key was coordination. The solution required technology from 7 different species, combined in ways that had never been attempted before. Thurian quantum communicators, Zerani dimensional scanners, Altarian bioresonance generators, and human-designed signal amplifiers were integrated into a device that could theoretically punch messages through interdimensional barriers. The first transmission took 47 hours to configure and 17 hours to send. It consisted of a single word, hello. The response came back in 3 minutes. Thank you for coming. The conversation that followed revealed the true scope of the crisis. The Sol system had been invaded by entities from parallel dimensions, beings of pure energy that existed outside normal space-time, and viewed physical matter as a disease to be eradicated. Earth scientists had managed to contain them inside a barrier, but the barrier was powered by Earth's entire industrial capacity and could only be maintained for a few more weeks. We can hold them, transmitted Admiral Rebecca Martinez from Earth's Orbital Command Center. But we can't destroy them. They exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Every time we damage them in our reality, they just shift to another dimensional layer. Dr. Kolovex studied the transmitted data with growing excitement. But that's the answer, she announced to the science team. If they exist in multiple dimensions, we can collapse those dimensions around them. It requires a precisely coordinated energy pulse delivered from multiple realities simultaneously. And how exactly do we deliver energy pulses from other realities? Asked General Morthek. We don't, Kolovex replied. But we know someone who might be able to help. The someone turned out to be the hegemony of ascended minds, a species that had evolved beyond physical existence centuries earlier and rarely interacted with material beings. They existed as pure consciousness in higher dimensions, occasionally offering cryptic advice to younger civilizations, but never directly intervening in physical conflicts. The request for help was transmitted through channels that most species didn't even know existed. The response came in the form of a single entity manifesting aboard the Liberation Fleet's command ship, a shimmering presence that spoke directly into the minds of everyone present. Why? The entity asked. Should beings of pure thought concern themselves with the survival of creatures trapped in matter? Ambassador Lyralii stepped forward, representing not just her own species, but the entire gathered fleet. Because 5 years ago, a human captain risked his life to save my daughter from freezing to death in space. He didn't know us anything, and gained nothing from helping us. He did it because it was right. She gestured to the displays showing 3,000 ships from 43 species. Everyone here learned from that example. We learned that helping each other isn't about gain or loss. It's about who we choose to be. If we abandon the humans now because the risk is too high, we abandon everything they taught us about being worthy of rescue ourselves. The entity was silent for long moments, processing concepts that were foreign to beings who had transcended physical needs and emotional motivations. These humans, it finally said, they have changed you. They've changed the entire galaxy, Lyralii confirmed. They showed us that survival doesn't have to mean competition, that strength can come from cooperation, that the best way to save yourself is to save others first. The entity considered this, its presence flickering as it communicated with others of its kind in dimensions beyond physical perception. Very well, it announced. We will assist. Not for the humans specifically, but for what they have created in you. The possibility that material beings might evolve beyond their base nature without abandoning their physical forms. The battle that followed existed across 7 dimensions simultaneously. While the Liberation Fleet maintained precise positioning around the Sol system barrier, the ascended minds engaged the energy entities in dimensional layers that normal matter couldn't perceive. The coordination required split-second timing across multiple realities, with quantum communications linking events that occurred in different dimensional frameworks. When it was over, the barrier around Sol dissolved like morning mist. The first transmissions from Earth carried reports of victory, gratitude, and a question that made everyone smile. What can we do to help you get everyone home safely? Even while trapped in their own system, facing an existential threat that could have destroyed their entire civilization, the humans' first concern was how they could help the people who had come to rescue them. The Sol Liberation Project became the final proof that humanity's greatest export wasn't technology or military power. It was the simple idea that people should help each other because helping was right. As the Liberation Fleet dispersed, carrying news of the victory to every corner of the galaxy, Ambassador Lyrelii remained behind to visit Earth. She wanted to see Marcus Chen again, to thank him personally for the lesson that had saved not just her daughter, but an entire galactic civilization's soul. She found him in a small cafe near the Luna Station spaceport, older now, but still carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had never doubted that doing the right thing was always worth the risk. "Captain Chen," she said, approaching his table. "Do you have a moment?" Chen looked up from his coffee, recognizing her immediately despite the years. "Ambassador Lyrelii, it's good to see you again. How's your daughter?" "Grown up, married, with children of her own," Lyrelii replied, sitting across from him. "She tells them the story of the human captain who shared his warmth when they were dying in the cold." Chen smiled. "I hope she tells them they would have done the same thing in my place." "Actually," Lyrelii said, "that's exactly what she tells them. And, thanks to you, it's true. The galaxy learned to share its warmth because a human captain showed us what that looked like." She gestured toward the viewport, where ships from dozens of species could be seen docking with the station, former enemies now working together, sharing resources and knowledge as naturally as breathing. "You saved more than 2 lives in that emergency shelter," she continued. "You saved the idea that strangers could care about each other's survival. That lesson spread to every corner of the galaxy, and today it saved your entire species." Chen considered this, watching an Thurian cargo ship dock next to a Zerani research vessel, while a Vorthack patrol craft provided escort protection for both of them. "I think," he said finally, "we all saved each other. That's what people do when they remember they're all in this together." Looking out at the thriving, cooperative civilization that had grown from a simple act of sharing body heat with a dying child, Chen realized that the cold darkness of space wasn't 18 months later. Most of the refugees had been resettled on permanent worlds. But many chose to remain in the emergency habitats, which had evolved into thriving communities. Asteroid Station New Harmony became home to the galaxy's first truly multi-species city. Habitat Platform Unity developed into a center for interspecies research and cultural exchange. The Andares crisis had done something unprecedented. It had shown 4 billion people that they could live together peacefully, regardless of their origins. More importantly, it had shown the galaxy that human leadership didn't mean human dominance. Under human coordination, every species had contributed according to their abilities and received according to their needs. No one had been abandoned. No one had been forgotten. No one had been considered expendable. The age of us versus them politics was ending. The age of all of us together was beginning. And it had all started with a human captain who refused to let strangers freeze to death in the darkness of space, because that's what people did for each other. The galaxy was finally learning to be worthy of the humans who had chosen to live in it. Any human ship would have responded to the crisis, yes, but they wouldn't have responded alone. Somehow, in the 6 months since Marcus Chun had shared his body heat with a dying Zelfran child, humanity had managed to inspire something unprecedented in galactic history. They had created a community where an attack on one was genuinely treated as an attack on all, not because of treaties or mutual defense pacts, but because it was simply the right thing to do. The Vorthack had tried to test human weakness and, instead, discovered human strength. Not the strength of superior weapons or advanced technology, but the strength that came from knowing that when you stood up for what was right, you wouldn't be standing alone. News of the Kepler system confrontation spread across the galaxy even faster than the Zelfrin rescue footage had. But this time, the message was different. This time, the galaxy learned that human compassion wasn't just a feel-good story. It was a force that could mobilize fleets and humble empires. The age of galactic bullying was over. The age of community defense had begun. And it had all started with one human captain who refused to abandon 300 strangers to slavery, even when facing impossible odds. The galaxy was learning that when humans said they would protect you, they meant it. All of them. Forever. Creates soft diplomacy as a natural consequence, even though that's not its purpose. Captain Chen didn't help us to gain Zelfrin friendship, but our friendship is what he achieved. The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Regardless of whether the representatives understood human motivations, they could not ignore human results. Every species that had received human aid had become a reliable human ally. Every conflict where humans had intervened on humanitarian grounds had resulted in stable, peaceful resolution. Most importantly, no species had ever reported being betrayed by human promises or abandoned once human help was offered. As the session ended, Ambassador Lyralii lingered to speak with several representatives privately. The message she shared was simple but profound. Humans didn't just rescue people from freezing in space. They rescued entire civilizations from the coldness that came from believing no one would help when help was desperately needed. That night, quantum messages flew across the galaxy as dozens of species began revising their diplomatic strategies. The age of viewing humans as just another competitor for resources was ending. Something new was beginning. An age where beings throughout the galaxy began to understand that humanity offered a different kind of relationship entirely. One based not on mutual benefit or strategic advantage, but on the radical idea that intelligent life was inherently valuable, regardless of its origin or capabilities. The revolution had started with a human captain sharing body heat with a dying child. But it would end with something far more profound. A galaxy learning to care about the welfare of species they had never met, in star systems they would never visit, simply because caring was the right thing to do. The humans, it seemed, were teaching the galaxy how to be more than just survivors. They were teaching it how to be a community. Estayered normal circulation to all of them. Why did you risk your lives for us? We are strangers. Different species. Chen considered the question for a moment. It was something he'd been asked before, by other species who couldn't quite understand human motivations. Because that's what people do for each other, he said finally. Doesn't matter what you look like or where you come from. When someone's in trouble, you help them. Lyralii looked at him with those large, expressive Zelfrin eyes that seemed to see deeper than human vision allowed. This is why the galaxy speaks of humans as they do. You are not the strongest or the smartest species. But you are the only ones who would strip off your protection to warm strangers. I don't know about that, Chen replied. I just know what felt right. But, as he settled in for the long journey back to regular shipping lanes, with two grateful Zelfrin passengers who would forever be changed by their encounter with human warmth, Chen couldn't help but think that maybe this moment would ripple out into something larger. Maybe word would spread about the human ship that risked everything to save two Zelfrin lives. Maybe other species would start to understand what made humans different. Maybe, in some small way, this would change how the galaxy saw its people. Or maybe it wouldn't matter at all. Maybe the only thing that mattered was that a mother got to hold her child again, and two lives continued on that would have ended in the cold darkness of space. Either way, Captain Marcus Chin slept well that night, knowing he'd done exactly what any decent person would do. The fact that it might make humans legendary across the galaxy was just a bonus.